Hello, beautiful community. We're back with another episode of Abundance of Hope's Just Look vlog.
Yay!
I'm Selena.
I'm Marissa.
I'm Pamela.
And today our topic is anti-Blackness in non-Black communities of color.
Which we know is rampant.
Pervasive.
It's out there.
It's unfortunate and it's harmful. And I think that a lot of, I'll just say, non-Black POCs don't realize that they have this systemic privilege over the Black community and that they actually benefit and systemically participate in anti-Blackness. And you do.
Yeah, and that's like for me, when I think about anti-Blackness and non-Black communities of color, I'm just like, all this for me. So like literally everyone benefits from anti-Blackness but Black people. Okay. It's good to know. So with that being said, for me, I think it's extremely important to discuss anti-Blackness and non-Black communities of colors as a Black-led and operated nonprofit. Is because we serve non-Black communities. So obviously it's relevant to us.
Yes.
And so for me, like, I feel like as a Black-led organization that serves non-Black communities, I would love to be in partnership with these other non-Black organizations, right? Like just be in partnership because our communities are, and obviously, you know, we're serving your community. Hopefully you're serving ours too. But I feel like that's kind of where this anti-Blackness becomes a barrier for our organization in the community. And for other Black-led organizations and Black businesses, like there's just now a culture where people actually are like, oh, like I can actually say this is a Black-owned business, and I won't be
some kind of backlash.
I won't have negative consequences associated with it. And there's still businesses that don't even acknowledge being Black-owned or Black-led because of anti-Blackness. So I think it's really important for non-Black people of color to acknowledge, own up to, and be anti-racist and be a counter force to anti-Blackness.
Yeah, and want to know what's interesting? And I'm sorry, because everything with me seems to come back to domestic violence. But this would actually be a good, for me, I was thinking this would be a good way to trauma bond. Oh, because if other ethnicities haven't been,
not good.
But if they haven't been traumatized by the United States, and they have,
but that's not a trauma bond. Remember,
I'm just saying. But when they look at, when you compare it to that, I'm saying this would be a good way. We've all suffered under the hands of the United States. We've all experienced discrimination.
Yeah, that would be us bonding through trauma, which is not trauma bonding.
Yeah, I know, not trauma bonding, but I'm saying this is a way that trauma should be bonding us. They can look at us as because
we have a common enemy, which is the system of white supremacy, the system of racism, which
and we've all
impacts all of us.
Yes, all of us. So in that way, it's like we've managed to not bond, you know, and I think that's systemic too, because we're pitted against one another in a whole lot of ways.
When I think about
historically,
absolutely,
historically,
through colonialism is the history we're referring to. But when I think about it, for me, I just think about like, so we have anti-Blackness, and then we have racism, which affects all of us. And then we have anti-Blackness, which only affects the Black community negatively. But when I think about it, I think about it within this larger scheme of intersectionality. You know, we all carry some privilege. We all are subject to oppressions underneath
this caste system.
These list of oppressive systems, right? So if this one don't catch you, this one might. And that's why, again, I think it's so important that we are all acknowledging the effects of anti-Blackness. Like we need to be talking about anti-Blackness more. We need to be talking about, like I heard there was a grant that was like, oh, the unique experience that Black Americans have. I was like, you mean anti-Blackness? Right? Like there's a lot of vocabulary out there that kind of tiptoes around it. They're like trying to ban critical race theory, which is like the acknowledgement of anti-Blackness and racism in the United States. So, like, I feel like, you know, with all that conversation out there, with people gatekeeping Blackness more, you know, there's more of this conversation.
You know what I thought of immediately when we were talking about non-Black POCs and their anti-Blackness was when we were trying to partner with an organization that was Black run, but they had a non-Black person of color in a position of power. And remember that we wanted to do something that was anti-Blackness healing circle that was specifically for Black people. And this non-Black person was like, well, you guys can't, basically telling us we can't do a healing event that was specifically for the Black community. And mind you, this is a woman who is in a position of power at a Black, I don't know if it's Black founded or not, but I think it is. And run organizations. So
I'm like, supposed to be focused on the Black community.
Right. So I'm like, but we have this non-Black person here who I would think the only reason you would be in this position is because you're in solidarity with the Black community.
She was married to a Black man and had biracial kids, so that qualified her.
No,
she was culturally competent.
That
you know, made her culturally competent too.
But she's here telling us that we can't have an event specifically for Black people while she's in a position of power at a Black organization.
Yeah, and it was wild for me, like wording, like all type of things, like it was that kind of dog whistle, right? Which again, when it pertains to anti-Blackness, the non-Black person in the room might not hear it, but the Black people are all going to be aware.
Exactly. And then again, when we were at this protest and we had some Native American folks there, Indigenous folks there, and they're like, oh, if you're not Native, you are guests in this land. And so me, as a literal hostage.
And immigrants.
Right. As a literal hostage in this land, being told that I'm a guest in this land was really awkward for me. I was like, so...
Yeah, and for me, it's always the thing, if it don't apply, scroll by. So, sure, if it's just out there in the world. But again, context is so very important. These are Black spaces where Black organizers have come and created this space where Black people are the topic, right? So it's like within these contexts when non-Black people come into Black spaces. And again, solidarity. I always say Black people are so welcoming. We are so welcoming, sometimes to a fault, right? Because when we allow other communities to come into our space, sometimes I think we're missing the intentionality in how, because how you do something is very important and it's very telling, right? And the thing is, like, when the script is flipped, that's how, you know, anti-Blackness do not go. It's never a two-way street here, right? Because when Black people go into other communities spaces, we have home training, right? We got words for it in our community. You better act right. You don't go into other people's spaces acting a fool. You don't go there taking up space when it's not about you. But when it comes to other communities coming into Black spaces, we've seen it time and time again where it's supposed to be a space of healing for Black people, or it's supposed to be a place of empowerment for Black people, or it's supposed to be a place where Black people our beings, our feelings, our images, what have you, are supposed to be centered. And then other communities will come in solidarity or what have you, and there's always a decentering. There must be a decentering of the Black people, of the Black issue, whatever it is, because these people are now in the space. And so for me, it's like, I think that people who want to engage with the Black community who are non-Black should be a little bit more critical of themselves and think about, okay, so how do I show up in Black spaces? Am I taking up space in a Black space where I should be giving a donation, sharing a flyer? You know what I mean? Like, there's just other ways that you can support the community and projects. And I feel like when it is the Black community, they're just like, the bar is in hell for how you should come into space, for how you should treat this, for how intentional you should be. And that is evidence and a byproduct of anti-Blackness from non-Black communities of color.
Absolutely. So for my takeaway, I would just want non-Black communities of color to, like you said, show up in a way that actually honors the Black community, especially when you're supposed to be coming in solidarity.
Right.
Realize and understand that while we are on this land, we are not guests. We are literal hostages.
Yes,
actually, literally hostages.
I actually very briefly want to discuss how after enslavement ended and our ancestors freed themselves from enslavement, there were whole ass cruise companies established to take us home, right? So that was shut down by the US government and by business practices that made it like really hard for the businesses to flourish. So when you're in a country that you were brought to for generations, you were exploited, you're made to stay here, you have to pay to actually not be a US citizen. And then you have this relationship with home that's so strained. It's extremely hurtful to hear things like you're an immigrant here, you're here by choice, yada yada yada.
Right.
It's extremely insulting.
And I'd like to speak something on that, because we're doing a lot of looking into our genealogy and background searches, and all of your family was not brought up. It's really interesting, because there's family that are indigenous to this land that were here when the others came. So either way, it's in a capacity that was harmful.
Right.
You know
so it's
what I mean?
like
It wasn't
either
a good thing.
our African ancestors who are already here pre transatlantic slave.
Native American.
Yes, that's what I'm
ancestors.
saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying
Mayans.
Native Africans who had come here with African ancestry were here pre-slave trade. And so my saying is like, whether we are speaking of those ancestors of mine or we are speaking of the ones who came on the ship. Either way,
either or.
It's dishonest, it's inaccurate, and it is offensive to call African American people who have that history guests. Where child, we ain't never been treated like guests
and
here.
it's extremely insensitive.
Right.
So again, ending things on a positive note, please just check your anti-blackness. Like, even if you're black, we got to check ours too. It's all about making this world a place where everyone is honored, respected, and safe, because that's what we're about. Abundance of Hope is about, you know, reducing crime, or reducing harm, crime reduction. We're about abundance. Abundant communities are not full of crime.
And the word community, we have to stress that we're about community, period. Community.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right, until next time, community, we'll see you.
Yes, don't be anti-black.